Hey folks, today I'd like to talk about the horoscope of Sean Diddy Coombs. So, as no one can help but notice, he's been in the news a lot. He was arrested mid-September on roughly 120 charges named in the indictment. And this is the result of some 3,000 complaints having come forth over the last several years, regarding sexual assault and rape and tampering with drinks in order to incapacitate a potential victim, and so on and so forth. And as recently as this weekend, there was more information coming up. So as everyone pretty much knows as well too, Diddy is famous as a rapper and has enjoyed incredible financial success. But he was also, famous slash infamous for his wild, private parties. And it's this aspect of his life that has, kind of come back to haunt him and caused, some, major kerfuffle in his life. And that's an understatement, of course. So some of these charges are quite serious. After sifting through so many, they've got 120 credible charges, and some of which include people who were minors at the time that the alleged, crimes occurred. So because of these many complaints, back in March 2024, the Department of Homeland Security raided Coombs' principal residence in order to seize potential evidence of his crimes, which involved a whole lot of video and a whole lot of sex toys and other stuff, which has, recently titillated the public. So he's in deep, deep jeopardy. And of course, a lot of people in Hollywood and the music industry are probably squirming a little bit right now and fearing that, when Diddy's case goes to court in May of 2025, they're probably worrying that their names are going to turn up in some of these transcripts. And probably some people are praying that he might go the way that Jeffrey Epstein did in his jail cell all alone some night when the cameras are turned off. So this is a pretty sad story. It's a rags to riches tale. I mean, Diddy was born in pretty much impoverished circumstances. And basically through dint of, great effort and some good fortune and connections and collaborations, he made a tremendous success of himself. So, but I haven't plunged into this immediately because birth time was lacking. And of course, astrologers hate celebrity horoscope has no birth time because, then we don't really have a solid foundation to talk about it. But I'm going to address that right now. So let's have a look at that horoscope. So here's the horoscope in question. Now I'm starting off with the noon birth, which was all we knew until I went through this rectification exercise. So, here you'll see the sun in the 10th house, as it naturally is for a noon birth. And, you could work with this to a certain degree and observe a number of things in it. The graha avastas, for instance, sun is debilitated. The moon is somewhat dark. Mars is exalted in Capricorn. Mercury is ordinary with the sun. Jupiter is in a planetary war with Venus. Take note of the degrees. Jupiter 28-27 Virgo, Venus 28-44 Virgo. Graha Yuddha, planetary war, occurs when any two visible grahas, that's Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, any one of those two is literally within 1 degree of longitude of each other. So there's an issue for Jupiter. It's in planetary war. Venus also in planetary war, and Venus also debilitated. Moving on, Saturn is retrograde and Saturn is debilitated. And of course, there are patterns of influence, among the grahas here, and I'll get into that later. First things first, from the perspective of attempting to rectify this horoscope, I was immediately intrigued by this planetary war between Jupiter and Venus. Here was my logic. Venus is the karaka for pleasure and sexuality. And let's just stop right there without going further. Jupiter is the karaka for dharma, doing the right thing. So when you have a planetary war between these two grahas, Jupiter and Venus, you can see the kind of a clash in values versus behavior in the sex parties that Diddy allegedly hosted, and how that has come to, plague his life. First, a great pleasure in his life, but now, a huge albatross around his neck. So I was intrigued by that planetary war, which, is going to stand regardless of where we rotate this chart in the course of a day, trying out different ascendants. That planetary war will continue. But I was interested in this notion that I felt compelled to explore first. Given that those two are in war, and they sort of reflect a kind of a moral collapse, if you like, I thought, I wonder if I can rotate this chart to have these two grahas, Jupiter and Venus, ruling the two bhavas of the horoscope that reflect upon morality. So let me experiment with one of those first, and I'll illustrate what I mean. So one of the things I did was I looked at a Cancer lagna. Now, why Cancer? Well, observe this. The fourth house is one of those houses for morality. It's where mom instructs us in the ways of how to behave with other kids our age and how to behave at home, etc., etc. It's the foundation of, building proper behavior. Later on, as we move out into life, the father or the guru, basically, and this is the ninth house now, teaches us the ways of the world outside the home and how we need to behave with respect to others of our peers and, our general social circle. So the ninth house is another house regarding morality. So if we play around with the rotation of lagnas, we can get a couple of instances where Jupiter and Venus, the two planets that are in planetary war, will be simultaneously owners of these two respective morality houses. So here with the Cancer lagna, we get Venus ruling the fourth house, Libra, and Jupiter ruling the ninth house, Pisces. So, as far as logic goes, this satisfied me to say, okay, Jupiter and Venus are in planetary war. They're the two lords of, so-called morality building houses. And perhaps, this will help us explain both the moral collapse and, other things that, happen in his life. So I hummed and hawed over this horoscope a little bit for various reasons, yoga vichara, bhava vichara, and subsequently dasha vichara. I passed on this particular lagna, said, let me try something else. So I tried Virgo lagna as well too. Why Virgo lagna? Because again, in this instance, I could have Jupiter ruling the fourth and Venus ruling the ninth. Again, the two lords of morality building houses. I could have them in planetary war, which creates, a major conflict and fallout in the life regarding the houses occupied, the house occupied, and the houses ruled by those two respective grahas. So, again, I looked at this, and for various reasons, I rejected this and continued to move on. Well, long story short, I ended up with a Libra lagna. So let me walk you through why I chose this. So first things first, a Libra ascendant satisfied my sort of, snapshot of Diddy, a person, who is an artist, a pleasure-loving individual, a fashionista, somebody who really had incredible style in terms of clothes, and who enjoyed a bit of a flashy lifestyle. Then we look a little closer, we see Sun and Mercury, forming Buddha Ditya Yoga in the first, in the sign of Libra, which is, often about collaboration and successful cooperation with others. So much of his success, aside from his own artistic merit in his early albums, later on, a great part of his success can be attributed to his successful collaborations with, a number of other figures in the music industry. Okay, so let's drill down a little bit further into the Libra ascendant. Incidentally, I want to remark, just as an aside, however, how did I arrive at this Libra ascendant? Well, I had recourse to a particular technique that arises from the Krishnamurti Padati method, which involves something called ruling planets. And the basic hypothesis is this. When you're ready to rectify a horoscope, you produce a prashna, and by observing key grahas in that prashna, you then expect to find them playing some role of dominance and influence in the horoscope that you are attempting to rectify. So I'm not going to go through the nuts and bolts of that, perhaps in another post. So that's what allowed me to arrive specifically at a birth time of 5:30 in the morning on Sean Diddy's birth date, which is 4th of November 1969 in Harlem, New York. Okay, so we end up with fairly specific lagna in Libra, but the nakshatra lagna happens to be Chitra. So what's interesting about this now is that Chitra spans the last two padas of Virgo. That's the last 6 degrees and 40 minutes of Virgo, and the first two padas, or 6 degrees and 40 minutes into Libra. So what's interesting here is that both the ascendant falls within Chitra, and so too does the ascendant lord Venus, along with Jupiter. So Chitra becomes significant because a number of the themes related to Chitra come out in Sean Diddy's life. So Chitra likes to enjoys privacy, and in fact, the ascendant lord Virgo, debilitated and gone to the 12th, and there in planetary war in Chitra, is very much a signature for a public person who has a great need for privacy. Hence his, tendency to utilize private clubs for him to, enjoy himself at his leisure without, being exposed to the public. Well, at the time he wasn't. Subsequently, he's going to be. So some other things about Chitra. Chitra likes privacy, but likes to dazzle other people. Chitra likes to organize things, but Chitra also likes to control. Chitra likes to play sugar daddy, a benefactor for others, but also as a means to control them and have them in his debt. Chitra loves photography and, by extension, video. And ironically, it's the great collection of photography and especially video that has proved to be such damning evidence that will, be very problematic for Diddy once this goes to court. Okay, so moving on. In this horoscope now that I've settled upon initially by finding it using this, KP method of ruling planets, subsequently it must stand the test of, does the ascendant make sense by Rashi? By rising nakshatra? I certainly believe it does. What about yogas within the horoscope now too? So there's a lot of stuff going on here which gives him the strength that we would expect for somebody who became something of a megastar. A lot of these yogas involve Mars. So first and foremost among those is one of the Panchamahaprusha yogas, which is Ruchika Yoga, formed by Mars being exalted in a Kendra. In this case, it's in the 4th house. There's also Mars-Saturn make a mutual aspect to each other. And because Saturn is lord of the 5th and Mars is lord of the 7th, this forms one of these, reputable Dharma Karma Adipati yogas. Raja yoga, many people will call it, but it's not the most exemplary. But it's a solid one. There's also a parivartana going on there between Mars and Saturn as well, too. Mars in the sign of Capricorn ruled by Saturn, Saturn in Aries ruled by Mars. So there's a very powerful sambandha here between Mars and Saturn, involving, Lord and occupant of the seventh. I think this goes a long way to explaining, some of the abusive behavior that he wreaked upon many of his intimate partners and associates. There's what else? There's a Dana yoga here with Mars and Saturn as well too. Here we use Mars as the second lord, Saturn as a trinal lord. So that's another powerful yoga involving Mars. A host of powerful yogas involving Mars. Mars, it's got this, warrior type vibe, also a bit of a thuggish vibe as well too, which Diddy certainly cultivated over the years through, his association, as rappers often do, with, thug life on the street. Weapons charges and assaults charges and all that sort of thing. There's a bunch of other yogas here. There's a couple of Dana yogas involving the sun. Let's see, the sun is the fifth lord, and it combines with Mercury as the ninth lord to create one Dana yoga, and that's by association. And then Sun and Saturn in mutual aspect, where Sun is the Dana lord of the 11th, and Saturn is the Trikona lord of the 5th. That forms another one of these Dana yogas. Buddhiditya yoga with Sun Mercury, I'd already mentioned before. There's a couple of other yogas of interest too as well. There's Mercury and Venus are in a parivartana because Mercury occupies Libra owned by Venus, while Venus owns Virgo. Venus occupies Virgo owned by Venus. So there's a parivartana between lords 1 and 12. That too can, signify some fascination for sexual experience and the need for privacy. And last but not least, there's a Shakata yoga here as well. So Shakata yoga is found when moon is in house 6, 8, or 12 with reference to Jupiter. So here's Jupiter in the 12th. The moon is 12 houses away, so that fulfills the first condition. We have to make sure that the moon is not in a Kendra, which could cancel that. It's not. So this is a valid Shakata yoga. What does Shakata yoga mean? Significant rises and falls and ups and downs and reversals and upheavals in the course of life. Thus far, that was not evident. Suddenly, it is. And, I'll explain part of that later as well, too. So, there are several things that I liked about the disposition of this horoscope, from the ascendant, the rising sign, the rising nakshatra, and the many yogas. So notice, and I'm going to recap some of these and introduce other new ideas. So in the Kendras, you have 3 malefics: Sun, Mars, and Saturn. That can make for, sometimes a cruel person who is hard on others. Sometimes it's mastery of a technical subject matter, and other times it's just sort of bad behavior. Sun and Mars have a commonality in that they are both what we consider kshatriya grahas, karakas for the ruling class, which in the old days used to be the king, the commander-in-chief, but in modern times are presidents, CEOs, directors, anyone who has a command and control disposition, a desire to control others. I think, that's very evident. Multiple Dana yogas, 3 of them, full-blown proper Dana yogas, which justify, his significant wealth. He became a billionaire before, the proverbial shit hit the fan. And of course, he's losing endorsements and various deals, and, honorary doctorates from universities are being withdrawn, and all of this, his star is fading fast, and so is his net worth as a consequence of that. I alluded to the mutual aspect and parivartana yoga between Mars and Saturn to explain, this abusive treatment of partners. the parivartana between Mercury and Venus, the sexuality theme, and the Shakti yoga for the dramatic fall from popularity. Last but not least, it's not a yoga, but it's not a valid yoga, but people who know this stuff to a certain superficial level will say, hey, isn't there a Viparita yoga going on in his chart? And for those who know the rules, Viparita yoga is formed when there's two formations. One, when Lord of Trikishtana goes to another Trikishtana, not its own, and enjoys a certain strength there and is not associating with or being aspected by any other non-Trik graha. That can form Viparita yoga. But so too can we form Viparita yoga if the lords of any two Trikishtanas, 6, 8, or 12, are combined somehow, either by association or mutual aspect, in any house whatsoever, and not involved with any other non-Trik lord. That may form Viparita yoga as well too. So some people might look at this and say, hey, Jupiter owns the 6th, Venus owns the 8th, they have both gone to the 12th house. Wouldn't that be a Viparita yoga? Because it seems a sort of a negation of negative things. When two negative house lords join forces and go to a negative bhava, wouldn't that just reverse all the problems? Well, here's why that is not valid. It is true that the two stand alone and they are not involved in any way by association or aspect from any other graha. So that part is good. But the pivotal thing is, do either of these two enjoy strength? Because grahas need a certain strength in order to have the juice to activate the yoga. Well, what's the situation here? As already pointed out, Jupiter is in Graha Yuddha, planetary war with Venus. That's a weakness. Venus is also in Graha Yuddha with Jupiter. That is a weakness too. Now, sometimes you can determine, well, I should say, most of the times you can determine a winner in a planetary war, but that will still not render it strong because it suffers collateral damage from the fight. It's like two heavyweight fighters that go the entire 15 rounds, and one is judged the technical winner because of points accrued during the course of the fight. But at the end of the night, both of them feel like shit because they've been hammered for so long throughout that fight. So what's the deal here? Jupiter, is in planetary war. That's a weakness. Venus is in planetary war too, also a weakness. Furthermore, Venus is debilitated. This is almost literally the Parama Nicha point for Venus. What does that mean? Ultimate debilitation. We know that Venus is exalted. Its Parama Ucha point is 27 degrees Pisces. This is almost directly opposite. Directly opposite would be 27 degrees Virgo. He's at 2844. So this is the lowest point in Virgo's Rashi positioning for ultimate debilitation. It happens to be in planetary war as well. So bottom line, neither of these two enjoy any strength whatsoever, and that negates this Viparita yoga. What does that mean? There's no 11th hour rescue for Diddy from the mess that he is in. In fact, nothing but negative things, I believe, lie in his future, as we'll see. Okay, so let me just pause this for a moment. Okay, so all I need to do there was just change my screen a little bit, and I've removed the South Indian chart form, put the Rashi for the North Indian here on the left, and here on the right now I am using the D10 Dashamsha, which is based upon this 5:30 rectified birth time. And the reason I'm using this is to validate that birth time. I mean, I started off by using the KP method of ruling planets in order to determine this lagna of 548 Libra based upon that 5:30 birth time. But that, well, I got close to that, and then I tweaked it a bit to conform to the events in his life, the career events in his life. And that's what I want to illustrate now. So, rectification is a series of iterations of using different techniques in order to get to a result that satisfies never all, but most of the circumstances and events in the life. Okay, so let me get to this. So this is the D10. Notice in harmonic charts, we do not display the degree symbols. Anybody who does that, that's basically a ridiculous notion. This becomes a kind of an abstract horoscope, no longer with degree positions. That is meaningless to include them in amshas. Okay, so let's dig into this. So in terms of career, so his first album, No Way Out, came out in July 1997, at which time he was running Moon Mars. So first have a look in the Rashi, where you notice that the moon is the lord of the 10th house. Always going to allude to some degree of, public reputation or success or some action, key action that, can vault you into the public eye. Meanwhile, Mars is this very powerful graha that I showed earlier with this Libra ascendant. This Mars participates in a whole lot of very strong yogas. So the event, the first album, No Way Out, occurred in Moon Mars in July 1997. Notice that in the D10, Moon and Mars are both in a Kendra. Now, so one of the basic principles of interpretation from Sheshadri Iyer's extensive work on Amsha Vichara is that grahas that occupy Kendras or Trikonas in the Amshas will generally indicate positive things for the themes related to that particular amsha. So if you're looking at the D9, it's going to be happy circumstances regarding relationships. If it's the Saptamsha D7, it's going to be regarding kids. But for the D10 Dashamsha, it's going to relate to career. So notice that Moon and Mars are both occupying Kendras. Wonderful. What about the Moon? It's debilitated. Well, it's still in a Kendra, but because it's with its dispositor Mars, which is Swarashi in its own sign, the Moon's debilitation is relieved in this D10 horoscope, Amsha. So that's a positive thing, and and this will continue for the rest of the Moon Dasha as well. Second album came out in Moon Jupiter, and although this Jupiter is involved in Graha Yuddha, here in the Amsha it occupies a Kendra, and the Graha Yuddha sort of shadows it wherever it goes, but still it's in a Kendra and it's with a benefic. And then came a third album in Moon Saturn, and here Saturn is in a trinal house, so that's also a positive circumstance. Then later on in the Mars Dasha, and we would expect Mars Dasha to be quite good. Why? Because Mars is in its own sign in a Kendra, indeed the rising sign for the D10. So the album Press Play came out in October 2006. That was in Mars. And then Last Train to Paris came out in Mars Mercury. Now Mercury is not so well placed because it's in what we call a Dushtana, mild Dushtana, in the Amsha Vichara. The third is every bit as problematic as 6, 8, and 12. So there's a little bit of slippage there. This is one of those collaboration albums, and was no longer distinctly Diddy, and maybe his star began to fade a little bit right there. And then his fifth album was the Love album, which came out in Rahu Mercury. So where's Rahu in the horoscope? Rahu occupies the 12th. That's a Dushtana, and Mercury occupies a Dushtana as well too. So and that was treated with very mixed critical reviews and commercial appeal as well too. So in the way that was kind of symbolic of the way life was going to start unfolding for him. That was in September 2023. By then, many of these allegations were coming forward regarding, Diddy's involvement in, sexual assault, rape, and, spiking of drinks to, debilitate his proposed victims. So charges charges had not been laid, but a lot of suspicion and evidence gathering and investigations were underway. So Rahu, spelled the beginning of a professional downturn for him, something that affected his public life as well too. I mean, there were some bright spots during all that. He launched this, co-founded and launched something called Revolt TV, which happened early in the Rahu Dasha, but also, aggravated assault charges came out, the first of those serious ones, in June 2015. Then there was a lawsuit filed by one Cindy Ruella, that was in Rahu Jupiter. Notice Rahu is the Dasha Lord. It's going to affect, a lot of these bhuktis as well too. There were multiple sexual assault charges coming out in Rahu Saturn. And some of this we have to check back, with the natal horoscope as well too. Don't forget that Saturn is a pivotal player vis-a-vis relationships in the natal horoscope, with the mutual aspect between Mars and Saturn and the parivartana between Mars and Saturn. That forms a very powerful theme for, let's call it misbehaviors with significant others. And you couple, what's in the Rashi with what you find in the Amsha and make sense of that. Critically, the Cassie Ventura lawsuit came forward in late 2023, which was Rahu Mercury. So note here we get a sort of a bit of a perfect storm where Rahu occupies Adhisthana, Mercury occupies Adhisthana as well too. This Mercury is also afflicted by Saturn as well, powerfully so because it's in Saturn's sign. And during the same period, then the subsequent bhukti, Rahu Ketu, more sexual assault charges, and so you notice Ketu is here in the sixth house. If anything, that's even more problematic than Rahu's position, because Ketu occupies Adhisthana. It's associated with a malefic sun, which is powerful. It's aspected by another malefic Saturn, which is also powerful by virtue of its retrogression. So Ketu is quite problematic, and this is when things really started getting ugly for him. More sexual assault allegations and enough accumulating evidence, courtesy of the Department of Homeland Security raid upon his home, which happened during the Rahu Ketu period. The Rahu Ketu period continues. He was arrested on September 16th, and that was when, still in Rahu Ketu, and now we're down into the Antara Dasha of Jupiter. Which is interesting as well too. We already know that Rahu Dasha is difficult. Ketu Bhukti is very problematic. And what about Jupiter Antara Dasha, the third level down? Well, this Jupiter is involved in the planetary war with ascendant Lord Venus. So this is even more and more problematic and, quite symptomatic of, the circumstances that he's going through. As if we needed further evidence. I mean, I don't use Jaimini too much, but if you look at the Atma Karaka and the Amatya Karaka in his horoscope. Now, Atma Karaka is the one graha that has the highest degrees in the horoscope. That is Venus at 2844. The Amatya Karaka is the one with the second highest degrees. That's Jupiter in this case at 2827. So the Atma Karaka is basically a Karaka for the self, for the individual. The Amatya Karaka is symbolic of, or you could call it a Karaka, for the career, social status, and reputation. So here we have these two, the self and the career. Those two Karakas, Atma Karaka and Amatya Karaka, are in planetary war. both will suffer, no matter who technically might be the winner. It's usually Venus. But no matter who, there is this collateral damage that batters the both of them. And it's interesting that this sits in his horoscope, and also that it is playing out at a time when the Dasa is bringing forth some results for these two planets. So what else do we have going on? Okay, let's just talk a little bit about Rahu Dasha more extensively. So in the Rashi horoscope, Rahu will give the results for three different grahas. Rahu will give the results for the moon, which aspects it, and the moon is the 10th lord. And it's somewhat dark and waning. So there's some expectation that public reputation may suffer to some degree. Rahu will also give results for its Rashi dispositor, which is Saturn, which is involved in the mutual reception, Parivartana, and also mutual aspect with Mars. So that too is problematic for the Rahu Dasha. And what else? Yes, I knew I was coming back to Jupiter for some reason. Rahu is in a Jupiter nakshatra in the natal horoscope. And so during its dasha, Rahu will give results for that Jupiter as well too. And this Jupiter, of course, is the planet that is in Graha Yuddha, planetary war, with Lagnesh Venus. And so it kind of brings all of this full circle. Meanwhile, the day of his arrest, Venus by transit had circled the zodiac, so many times, and it had come back almost to its exact natal position on the day of his arrest. Oh yes, one thing I forgot to say, Rahu is giving the results for Saturn, and Saturn in this horoscope is a double maraka, in the sense that, a single maraka, because it occupies the 7th house. Okay, that is the extent of that. Let me stop that. Okay, so just a few concluding remarks to wrap up this post on Sean Diddy Coombs. So, celebrity horoscopes lacking a birth time are always a bit of a challenge for astrologers, because, there's a lot of possibilities for rotating the horoscope and, quite frankly, making sense of one or another of any particular orientation. And I've, seen this, situation, unfold so many times among my peers where we struggle with, unknown birth times and play around with horoscopes. And, sometimes for years continue to perpetuate the belief that such and such a lagna is what works best to explain, the circumstances and events in an individual's life. So it's pretty tricky business, but again, a profound intellectual challenge for those of us who, get drawn into this sort of situation. So just to recap my particular methodology in all this, I was very much intrigued by the Graha Yuddha between Jupiter and Venus, which, will remain there in that horoscope, irrespective of whether we rotate the horoscope through 24 hours of 12 different possible ascendants. So I worked with that theme of, the morality issue and see if I could, find anything that worked there. I ended up not being satisfied using that technique or logic that I had applied. I defaulted to my other methodology, the KP method of using ruling planets in conjunction with the prajna and the natal horoscope that you're proposing to rectify. And that, for me, rendered that 5:30 birth time, which resulted something approximating that. I definitely came to a Libra rising, but I fine-tuned it using the KP method and also using the amshas to make sense of his life, with the result that we now I now have something that I think works remarkably well, the natal horoscope, and also, the dashamsha. Arguably one could go through a few other amshas using what is known about his life in order to try to fine-tune that further. Because there was so much available on a public level around professional success, I chose to work with that. So where do we stand today? Well, Sean Diddy Coombs sits in jail without bail. I mean, there's evidence of such overwhelming evidence that it's a risk to let him out because, he has a lot of money and he could take off to parts unknown. So he is in jail, allegedly under suicide watch. I don't know if that's true or not, but I could imagine it must be miserable to be him right now. He's in a terrible jail, and to fall from grace, last month being able to do this, that, and the other thing, and this month staring at the four walls, it must be, well, there would be no words for it really. So that's a sorry state. He's going to remain there until trial. What lies in the future for him? Well, what comes next? In February, he enters. Well, he's in Rahu Dasha for quite a while. What comes next? Venus Bhukti. Now, what good could we possibly expect of Venus Bhukti? It is his lagna, gone to the 12th house, where it is doubly damaged by debilitation, almost at its parama nicha point, and in planetary war with Jupiter. Yes, there's a parivartana with Mercury that can be regarded as something of a rescue, but I don't believe that's going to do it. So that starts in February, his Venus Bhukti. Apparently he's going to trial in May. That's just a couple of months later, and of course a Rahu Venus Bhukti will last, I looked at it the other day, now I've forgotten, 2.5 to 3 years. It's one of the lengthy ones because Rahu Dasha is long and Venus Dasha is long, so they're conjoined. Dasha Bhukti periods are lengthy. So that's a long haul. And so I think he's almost certain to be convicted on overwhelming evidence and to quite possibly face life in prison. Could worse happen? Use your imagination. So a poor prognosis for somebody who once enjoyed the best that the world had to offer. Okay, that's a wrap for today. Thanks for watching. I know this was a long video. I hope it was instructive. Okay, take care all.